Good morning, everyone. My name is Kerry Craig, and I am your host this morning. It is Prosperity Indiana's pleasure to have you participate on today's webinar, Creating Quality of Place and Marketing Rural Communities. We wish to thank today's sponsor, Fifth Third Bank. Before I welcome Jacob Brown of Fifth Third Bank, I'd like to review some housekeeping items. First, please be aware that all audio is muted. If you'd like to ask a question, there are two ways to do so. First, you can use the raised hand icon on your screen, and I will call on you to ask your question. Or you may type your question into the question and answer box, which is also located on your screen. We all know that technology can be trying these days, especially while working from home. So if you lose your connection, you may also reconnect using the link emailed to you. Finally, Prosperity Indiana members may access today's presentation and recording later this afternoon in our member portal. And now I'd like to introduce Jacob Brown, who is the Vice President and Business Banking Relations Manager in the Greater Indiana market. He joined Fifth Third in 2014 and has served Central Indiana for the past 15 years. Jacob has held various leadership roles in retail and financial services in Fortune 100 and top private businesses. In his current role, he supports businesses with annual revenues between $2 and $20 million and is responsible for helping businesses grow and remain profitable. Jacob holds a Master's of Science in Business Management and Leadership from Western Governors University and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Indiana University. Jacob and his wife reside in Fishers with their 3 children. Welcome, Jacob.
Good morning. Thanks for having me yet again this week, and we're honored and humbled to be a part of this series. Now more than ever, Fifth Third Bank is proud to remind our communities that we've been standing by their side for over 160 years, and that certainly doesn't stop now. Given these unprecedented times, we're communicating more than ever about the resources and information available to secure the financial stability of our clients, our communities, and our families. At Fifth Third, we too are working diligently, much like the rest of you, to remain calm and consistent while trying to manage our organization. Through clear communications and discernment of our current resources, we've mobilized every asset available to better serve our customers while remaining hyper-vigilant to the needs of our own employees. We'll continue to be at the forefront of sharing our best practices and expertise throughout these unprecedented times, and we are grateful to Prosperity Indiana for gathering us all together to provide information and resources. We're excited to be a part of this webinar and to hear the questions of our region while continuing to grow our capacity to serve and advise in the months to come. So thank you again for allowing me to join you.
Thank you, Jacob, and thank you again to our partners at Fifth Third Bank for making today's webinar possible. For more than 30 years, Prosperity Indiana has mobilized members to create economic opportunities and improve social conditions, particularly for Hoosiers who are at most disadvantaged. As a statewide cross-sector membership network of approximately 200 organizations and individuals, Prosperity Indiana's impact through members has strengthened communities and improved lives in rural, suburban, and urban areas in every county. It is our mission to build a better future for our communities by providing advocacy, leveraging resources, including training and consulting services, and engaging an empowered network of members to do this important work. Our members represent human services, the arts, legal aid, congregations, workforce development, real estate, health services, financial institutions, philanthropy, all levels of government, community action agencies, private and nonprofit affordable housing developers, local economic development organizations, and more. If you are not a current member, please go to prosperityindiana.org to learn more. And now I'd like to introduce Roberto Gallardo, who is the director of the Purdue Center for Regional Development and Purdue Extension Community and Regional Economic Specialist. He holds an electronics engineering undergraduate degree, a master's in economic development, and a PhD in public policy and administration. Gallardo has worked with rural communities over the past 16 years, conducting local and regional community economic development, including use of technology for development. He has authored more than 90 articles and reports, including peer-reviewed and news-related regarding rural trends, socioeconomic analysis, industrial clusters, the digital divide, and leveraging broadband applications for community economic development. He is also the author of the book Responsive Countryside, The Digital Age and Rural Communities, which highlights 21st century community development model that helps rural communities transition to, plan for, and prosper in the digital age. He resides in West Lafayette with his wife and 2 daughters. The Purdue Center for Regional Development seeks to pioneer new ideas and strategies that contribute to regional collaboration, innovation, and prosperity. Founded in 2005, the center partners with public, private, nonprofit, and philanthropic organizations to identify and enhance the key drivers of innovation in the regions across Indiana, the U.S., and beyond. These drivers include a vibrant and inclusive civic leadership, a commitment to collaboration, and the application of advanced data support systems to promote sound decision-making and the pursuit of economic development investments that build on the competitive assets of the region. Welcome, Roberto.
Thank you.
And
Thank
if
you.
you'll just give me... Oh, I'm sorry, Roberto. I just was going to say, if folks will just give me 1 minute to transition over to you, we'll get started. All right.
There we go. Thank you for the introduction, Carrie. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again. Good morning. I'm delighted to be here. I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we're doing to move the needle in regards to prosperity here in Indiana. I'm going to go over some rural trends quickly, and then some of the case studies that we have or resources that we partner with state agencies and other communities in Indiana to, again, work on prosperity. First and foremost, let me start by defining rural. I know it's kind of hard to read all that, but when I say rural in the next couple slides, I'm referring to the dark green areas of the state. There's multiple ways to define it, but I just like to kind of make it very clear from the get-go that when I say rural, that's what I'm talking about. And this is the definition I used, and you can go and check out the more detailed definition. So let's start with population. Here you can see that population in Indiana, urban, small city, rural, 1970 is considered 1. And then the gray area is urban. You can see they've grown 35% over the past almost 50 years, if I can do my math correctly. Notice Indiana, of course, kind of shadows that. But then you have small city Indiana and rural Indiana, kind of they've remained stable, starting in the late 1990s and have remained in between 10 and 15% growth. But that's kind of what it's showing. Who has been growing? Here you see population pyramids from 2010 to 2019, in the last decade. I just want to point out there, the one on the left is in 2010, 2019. Notice that the 0 to 9-year-olds have decreased in Indiana overall. That's expected as the population grows older. The 70 to 79-year-olds share, the second to the top, increased. And you can see that a healthy ideal pyramid needs to be obviously a pyramid. This one is still in that respect. We are not seeing an inverse of a lot of older folks and less younger folks. That's Indiana in general. Here we see rural Indiana. You see that the 30 to 49-year-olds, it's a little bit skinnier in a way in 2019 compared to 2010 and compared to the Indiana in general. You can see also that the share of kids 0 to 9 has decreased, but that's a trend that we're seeing across the nation. We see that the 50 to 59-year-olds 60, 69-year-olds, you can see how they're moving up over the past decade. That's, again, nothing alarming here. It's just the normal trends. It's just important to keep in mind, obviously, for any prosperity effort, we have got to balance the younger population with the older population. Next, we see here the total employed, again, from 1990 to 2019. That's the Indiana overall urban, small city, and rural. Notice here again, urban is kind of leading the way. We see the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, and then they've all kind of bounced back in a way. Rural, however, notice they're still at the same level they were before the Great Recession, is the dark green line, while urban has outpaced where they were before, and small city Indiana has also kind of increased a little bit. But the good news is that they've kind of bounced back. Notice the last 2 years, 2018, 2019, small city and rural kind of have flattened. We're not sure exactly what that is, but that's just what the data is telling us from 1990 to 2019. Here we have per capita market income. This is not the same as per capita income. This one, we removed the transfer of receipts from government and just looked at purely market-related income. So here, this is in 2019 dollars. It is real dollars. We can see again a spike. It kind of went down in 2008, 2009, but then it's going up again. Notice here, dark green rural areas are outperforming. We need to take a deeper look into why this may be the case, but that's good news for rural communities in Indiana, obviously. You can see that they're all kind of bouncing back as of 2018. It's the latest year we have available. But now, as we all know, that the economy and the society is transforming into a digital one. So here we looked at 52 industries that are related to the digital economy. Here we calculated the share of the digital economy from 2001 to 2019 of total jobs. Here you can see urban is kind of picking up, and it's the highest share, more than 3.5%. This is a very conservative estimate, and keep in mind, it's a moving target. We're still trying to really define what digital economy is, but this is again based on 52 industries. We can see there the dark line, rural Indiana, has kind of floated between 1 and 1.5% over the past 18 years. We really need to, if we want to improve prosperity or increase prosperity in rural Indiana, we have to make sure that dark line continues, starts to move up. And so that's kind of one of the key messages that I want to leave with you guys today, is that we have got to start thinking of digital inclusion and other efforts if we are to increase prosperity in the state. So here, let me share with you a slide, digital divide profile. The higher the number on the left, the higher the divide. Indiana is right smack in the middle compared to the other states in the nation, as well as infrastructure and adoption score and socioeconomic score. I just want to point out a couple things here. Notice that almost 1/5 of homes in Indiana are not subscribing to the internet. The data is not telling me why. It's just saying that 18.2% of homes are not subscribing. That means that kids may not be able to do their homework, parents may not be able to remote work, or they may not be able to improve their skills. The socioeconomic score identifies those 4 characteristics that are known to impact technology adoption. So Indiana is right smack in the middle. We're not either outperforming or underperforming the other states in the nation. But if those numbers were to be higher, we have to keep an eye on those, because those groups typically have a harder time adopting technology. The graph on the right shows again the same break we've used: Indiana, urban, small city, and rural. And I just want to point out a couple of issues here. Notice that the percent of homes making $75,000 or more with no internet access in rural Indiana was 13.6%. Okay, that more than likely those are because of a lack of access. However, look at those homes with making less than $35,000. Almost half of those in rural Indiana do not have internet access. This digital exclusion needs to be addressed if we are to move that needle and ensure that prosperity continues in the state. You can see other variables there. The last one down there is the homework app. It shows the percent of children with a computer but no internet access. 12% of kids in rural communities do not have a computer but have no internet access, compared to 4.6 in urban Indiana. We have got to smooth out those differences if we are to choose to continue to prosper in Indiana. Because of that, we have developed a series of digital inclusion planning and resources, the Digital Divide Index, which I've shared with you. We've done a COVID mitigation vulnerability analyses showing which neighborhoods in the state are more vulnerable to not implementing COVID mitigation of e-learning and remote work. We have completed intelligent community checklist that helps local economic developers kind of understand this changing digital landscape. We've conducted more than 2,500 household data validation surveys that are helping in broadband planning. Along with that, we've developed 5 interactive maps to help in these planning efforts. We've also completed 4 state of broadband reports. These are so new. I wish I had more kind of detailed information on how the needle is moving. However, we have begun to see this type of movement. We got a regional robotics initiative launched in Eastern Indiana. Another community is mapping their free Wi-Fi hotspots. We were delighted to see that now the Indiana Broadband Office has done the exact same thing for the entire state. Another community is inventorying facilities conducive to hosting digital literacy workshops. We're training local chambers on how to offer our digital ready business program that it's targeted at moms and pops. And there have been a couple of digital skills workshops for veterans. This, again, it's all about awareness, and this is all tied to prosperity. I don't have a specific community because, you know, these plans and these reports are so new that the needles are starting to move at this point. In addition to digital inclusion, we have our hometown collaboration initiative. This, was sponsored by Okra. Those are the areas we've worked with, 19 in total, and it consists of bringing people together within the community. We build capacity. It was in partnership with Ball State, again in Okra. And we have different phases. The foundation, it's 9 modules that they go through and analyze what they're doing in their communities. Logan Sport and other communities have done a phenomenal job. We are now talking of doing a 2.0 version coming up. The building blocks included the economy, leadership, and placemaking. And so we've done 16,000 surveys, 1,000 foreign participants, and we are now going to share with you pretty soon a report of the impact. This one took place a while back, about 2, 3, 4 years ago, so we're starting to see some impact. The best that we've captured so far is that, the communities are willing or able to work together. As you know, that's critical for any prosperity initiative. And so this is what we found with the Hometown Collaboration Initiative. We also have the Rural Road to Recovery. I don't know if you read about it. We work with Ball State and Okra, and we work with those 5 agencies that report to the Lieutenant Governor. Each of these identified 3 priorities on how to respond and recover from COVID. And so the report is very granular in that sense. Placemaking is huge on the list. Again, it's very important for our efforts to do prosperity here in the state. And last but not least, let me share with you a couple of others that we've done as well that are helping with prosperity. Again, I don't have enough time to go in detail of the case studies that we're starting to document, but I just wanted you to be aware. We have a Rural Economic Development Innovation Initiative funded by USDA. We have 9 regions, one of them in Indiana, the other 8 are across the country. We're providing technical assistance to these regions to focus on e-connectivity, economic development, innovation and technology, and workforce development and quality of life. All these affect placemaking, obviously, and prosperity. Our Hometown Business Preservation Initiative, or HBPI, has guided more than 13 communities on how to establish a revolving loan fund. These can provide necessary loans based on community needs to small businesses impacted by COVID-19. We are also wrapping up our first Rural Opportunity Zones initiative initiative of Rosie. This one is we're hoping to launch a second version as well as the HBPI. Rosie educates about the opportunity zones. It develops economic development prospectus and portfolios to attract investment. We are working with 6 communities, and we're hoping to work with 6 more down the road. On the research side, we are also conducting a survey right now on manufacturing and artificial intelligence. We're targeting smaller manufacturers in Indiana. We want to know how ready they are to kind of embrace this technology and what we can do. You know, more productivity leads to more prosperity. So we're really excited about that one. And we're also looking at economic resiliency and recovery. The outcome of this research project is to develop a tool to help regions understand how to better recover and be resilient from economic terms. So that's kind of a quick, I know it was drinking from a fire hose, but I'm delighted to be here and given the opportunity. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Roberto. We appreciate your presentation. And now I'd like to introduce Courtney Zogg. Courtney is the founder and CEO of Plaka and Associates, an innovative boutique consulting firm based in Indianapolis. Courtney's experience includes the development and support of entrepreneurship, international and domestic business attraction, retention, and expansion, and programs for the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. She specializes in policy and qualitative analysis, leading entrepreneurship ecosystems analysis, strategic planning and research projects focused on innovation, industry, and talent, and designing policy recommendations in economic and talent development. Her clients include a range of entrepreneurs, investors, not-for-profits, developers, industry executives, state agencies, regional and local economic development organizations, planning organizations, city and town governments, and private companies. Courtney is a certified economic developer. She has led the creation of a comprehensive site certification program called VeriSite. This proprietary program creates narrative around in-depth market research and analyzes human capital components in order to provide decision makers with reliable data that compensates for industry gaps, such as brownfields and existing buildings. The partnership with the Genovis site selection team has allowed these firms to offer a unique and calculated perspective in economic development, strategic planning, and site evaluation, offering economic developers, organizations, property owners, developers, and communities a new trustworthy team that utilizes a myriad of expertise to support the client's work. Plaka is a multifaceted firm supporting industry, startups, developers, and economic development leaders in real estate and economic development. It's based in Indianapolis and known for expert leadership on difficult projects. Plaka assists clients across the U.S. in innovative entrepreneurship and economic development analysis and implementation, including feasibility studies, labor analysis and strategies, redevelopment and revitalization planning, strategic planning, project management, grant proposal development, and capacity building through a unique blend of expertise. I'd like to welcome Courtney, and I will give her control of the screen here momentarily. All right, Courtney, it's all yours.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, I will show my screen. First of all, thank you for the opportunity. But I also recognize that bio was too long. Thank you so much. But for the introduction, I'll cut down my bio next time. That was pretty wordy. And Roberto, thank you very much. It's been such a pleasure watching the work that PCRD does, and now with your leadership, I'm thankful to be a part of the webinar today. So much like Roberto defined rule, which is very important, I want to define placemaking and talk about why it's important. So, as you know, placemaking is everywhere, literally and figuratively, but what does it really mean? So what is the more important driver? Is it place or is it people? Can public, private, and community placemaking priorities be better aligned to create places that work for everyone? And with that, who should foot the bill for it? But the definitions for placemaking vary. For our discussion, placemaking is a continual process, bringing together all parts of the community to create a strong sense of place. And while it's important to understand what the community wants and needs, do know and recognize that no place will satisfy everyone. And so it's important to tailor your vision. It requires strong vision, it requires strong leadership, and also know that placemaking doesn't finish when a place is built. It's an ongoing process that needs to respond to the pace of change in your specific community, whereas some communities certainly change faster than others. So places must be able to adapt and be flexible and not over-designed for this reason. But why is it important? The sense of place, well, its amenities, it recirculates income locally at a higher rate. It reuses vacant land and underutilized buildings and even infrastructure. It creates jobs in construction, with local businesses and in cultural activities. It expands entrepreneurial ranks of artists and designers and even tech workers. It trains the next generation of cultural workers and attracts and retains non-arts related businesses and skills. It's very important. Now, I think you all know this, so I'm going to run through this a little bit more quickly than I typically do. And I do have quite a bit to cover, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But placemaking comes in more than one variety. So you have, in most instances, what we'd call the standard placemaking. So an incremental method of improving a location over a long period of time through typically their smaller separate projects or activities. But placemaking can also be called upon to create and implement larger scale, really transformative projects, converting a location in a short period of time into one that fundamentally exudes a strong a sense of place, and serves as a magnet for people in new development. So think of complete streets or form-based coding or new urbanism fostering that kind of placemaking. And then there are three varieties of specialized placemaking, we'll call it. So you have strategic placemaking, creative, and tactical. The three types of these focus on very specific quality of life improvements. They focus on achieving outcomes at specific scales and time periods, or they focus on just figuring out ways to try some things out as test strategies before policymakers commit significant amount of money and resources. And here's a little bit more of a breakdown. I'll say that all forms of placemaking depend on a broad engagement of stakeholders to design projects and activities, and this requires engaging and empowering the people to participate in the process. This is all about a bottom-up approach and certainly not a top-down approach. The standard types of projects would include things like downtown street and facade improvements, or neighborhood projects such as residential rehab or residential infill, improvements to parks and public spaces. But strategic placemaking aims to develop places that are uniquely attractive to talented workers, that attract businesses and those that catalyze job creation, income growth. This specific type of placemaking especially targets workers who, because of their skills, can choose to live anywhere and who tend to pick quality places offering certain amenities. So this is really a great focus for post-COVID remote workers that we'll talk through a little bit throughout the entire webinar today. Strategic placemaking is pursued collaboratively by the public, by the nonprofit and private sectors, typically over a period of about 5 to 15 years. And it is often in downtowns or along key corridor nodes. Creative placemaking, alternatively, focuses more on museums or performance halls or even housing for artists and new cultural activities such as public art displays or outdoor concerts and movies in the parks. It animates public and private spaces. It rejuvenates structures and streetscapes. It improves local business viability and public safety, and aims to bring really diverse people together to celebrate and inspire and be inspired. And I want to emphasize the inspiration piece because typically in the communities, I'll say a lot of times the communities that I'm working in that are in the Rust Belt, they lack this confidence in their economic prosperity. And so having this inspiration is really critical to help tell the story of hope and help tell the story of how to develop and be in control of one's future in the community. And then lastly, the tactical placemaking is described as incremental small-scale improvements. This approach allows a host of local stakeholders to test new concepts before making substantial commitments. So this is sometimes referred to as guerrilla urbanism or pop-up urbanism or DIY urbanism. And the term urbanism is misleading because it's really, the name itself can be applied anywhere, whether it's a rural community or a very large city. But the process really is to activate public spaces in a way that is lower risk and lower cost. This approach favors use over design and even comprehensive construction. So the goal is to strike a balance between providing comfortable and interesting places for people to enjoy, but also while generating the revenue necessary for maintenance and management, which is really, really important. So things can include such as, parking space conversions, parklets, or self-guided historic walks, or even outdoor music events in town squares. Or it could also, be having a pilot construction of a new form of dwelling in a neighborhood. Let's say, for example, using rail cars to construct either a residence or even a commercial building, or even the temporary conversion of a storage facility into a business. So what is it all about? To sum it all up in this slide, it's about connection and about managing change. So because placemaking is an ongoing process, design and planning must consider how the place will be used and managed over time, as well as how it will respond to change. So simpler designs, again, places to be constructed and managed are more affordably while leaving room for organic growth and ability to change. But, and I'll emphasize this extensively, not all placemaking efforts succeed, and they're not all good for public investments. So common challenges would, I think, in any form of economic development, but especially with placemaking, challenges would include creating these partnerships and countering skepticism on the part of the communities and public leaders. It would be challenges with assembling adequate financing for the projects, clearing any type of regulatory hurdles, avoiding displacement, which is really interesting, but also really important, and even developing performance metrics for the ROI for the project in and of itself. So a culture-based revitalization effort must be appropriate for its very local, hyper-local circumstances, and not to replicate what other cities and towns are doing. The best projects really nurture the distinctive qualities and resources that already exist in the community and can be celebrated to serve community members, both ones that exist, but also to draw in new visitors. So these are key elements and results, which really is an FYI, and be respectful of time, I'm going to keep moving. Here is a comparison of the different types of placemaking, but I want to emphasize that these four types are not mutually exclusive. The different types can be used in combination of one another or in sequence of one another, and if properly executed, it can improve an area's quality of place overall. But for the general economic and community development practitioner, I think strategic placemaking can offer the greatest return. So revitalization that increases housing or transportation choices and invests in urban-like amenities. I won't say urban amenities, but urban-like amenities to attract talent can result in faster gains in livability, in increasing population, increasing diversity, jobs, income, and even educational attainment, rather than other forms of placemaking. I think in addition to that, we'll talk a little bit about the different forms and strategies under each of those buckets. So as I mentioned before, standard placemaking tends to include permanent public realm and brick and mortar improvements. They typically have higher capital costs, they have a complex approval process, and sometimes they have long implementation schedules. Examples here that I have in the images, you have prominent gateways. There are wayfinding signage, which isn't as expensive, but still can be hard to implement. And even ways that you differentiate between different districts or neighborhoods are examples of standard placemaking strategies. Strategic placemaking strategies So examples here, you have focused on your actual target. So in many rural areas, you have typically some type of ag or bio focus for your industries. You have trails that you are implementing to both retain and attract workers. And then I have examples here of folks working in a coffee shop. So in addition to that, there are a number of programs and strategies that obviously communities use as a part of their economic development toolkit. So TIF or brownfield financing, redevelopment, small business support, workforce development. But generally, how do quality places lead to long-term economic growth? And so until recently, and I think most of you know this, employers made decisions for relocation based on the number of factors, access to raw materials, distance to market, so on and so forth. But then the workers would follow suit. So they would move to be close to the employer. And now that's the opposite. So you have knowledge-based industries that are crucial for economic growth, and those employers are competing for qualified workers. So instead of expecting their workforce to come to them, employers are now moving closer to where their workforce lives. And especially in the rural area, rural communities face unique challenges, but at the same time, they also have, at their disposal, a combination of types of capital that they can leverage to overcome these obstacles. So these assets could be human capital and the natural resources. So going back to the ag focus, through public-private partnerships and even CDFI investments, the establishment of cooperatives, these rural communities can take the futures into their own hands. Some of these strategies would include zoning and master planning. So it actually doesn't matter whether your town is large or small. Everyone needs to think about zoning and master planning in a way that promotes walkability and good physical design. It is attractive to relocating talent and to retaining talent. So are you asking, your officials, are you requiring sidewalks and new housing developments, or are you connecting streets rather than having a lot of dead ends? So these are not things that necessarily require a large amount of cash infusion. It's a change in policies, which does take sometimes a lot of time. And I know that there are some folks that are pretty adamant against it, but these are things to think about. These types of policies, investments are things to think about for strategic placemaking. In addition, any type of policy and investment that supports environmental sustainability has been shown to positively affect a community's image and attractiveness and can increase property values, incomes, and even employment levels. We know that parks and trails help attract and retain well-educated professionals, and in turn, then will influence the business's decisions on where to locate or expand. So what else besides making downtowns mixed use and more walkable can communities do to encourage growth and prosperity? The biggest one that I think I'll emphasize and what Roberto talked about quite a bit is this investment in infrastructure. So investments in technology, specifically high-speed internet, will accelerate business development by supporting innovation and entrepreneurship. And it'll also help expand existing businesses and create e-commerce opportunities. Not only it was important before COVID, but it's especially so critical now post-COVID's impact to both urban and rural communities. In addition, this investment will encourage entrepreneurial activity. So one myth I hear quite a bit, and some of it's explained with a little bit of frustration, and that is, rural entrepreneurs don't really exist. There's just not a lot of them. There's not a lot of us that live in the rural areas. But the idea that there aren't any is definitely not true, and it needs to be quashed. The entrepreneurs are in your community, and there's actually a lot of data that shows about 6% of the adult population is working on starting or is interested in starting a business. So the key for you is to find them, to support them, and connect them to resources to help them mitigate risk on their path to entrepreneurship. Next, I'll say is focusing on food and agriculture. There is certainly a renewed focus on regional food systems as a means for enhancing economic opportunity. In recent years, I think this has been pretty obvious. Consumers have become increasingly interested in where their food comes from and how their food dollars can provide greater support for local food-related businesses and even the farmers. So over the same time period, policymakers and practitioners really have gained insights into the potential for regional food systems to promote their economic growth in their communities through the creation of new or the enhancement of existing jobs and businesses. So regional food system stakeholders have learned that appropriately targeted policies and support can advance the economic and financial security of low and moderate income households and communities. So this is especially important as food insecurity is elevated, and that is in particular a case in many rural areas. So focus again, zoning, broadband infrastructure investment, ag and food systems. In addition, I would suggest focusing to create spaces where a community can gather in its full capacity and make things together. So these are often called community centers of power. These tactics could include things like expanding your farmers market into a community kitchen, or reviving the town's culture from music to dance, or starting companies and local shops where neighbors recovering from addiction or incarceration can find work. So the ultimate goal here is to leverage your community's cultural strengths to address the common challenges and seize the new opportunities. With creative placemaking, I would say above and beyond, if there's one key theme under creative placemaking, it's to make your innovation of what's happening in your rural community visible and public. So, even as it relates to ag and food, or even manufacturing related, I think often communities can turn to expensive architect design buildings and, expensive public spaces to try and differentiate themselves from competitors, which is not always a bad thing, but some of those investments cost more than they are worth. So instead, focusing on a sense of place provides a more cost-effective and meaningful alternative to those mistakes. And this process really begins with the question, and that is, what are we doing privately that we could be doing publicly? So for example, a company could showcase one of the more exciting aspects of their work in a transparent ground floor space or through programming in a public park. Public spaces or coffee shops with, of course, power outlets and Wi-Fi could obviously be your third places and places to linger, work, and think. In addition, something that has come up in conversations with developers, particularly in suburban areas, are these, what I'll call them, green rooms. So as they're building a mixed-use development, and as more and more of us are going to continue to work remotely, and I don't always love working right in my office at home, having some type of, we'll call it a green room, so that folks can reserve, maybe it's in their apartment building or in their housing development, but there's going to be a room where people can use when they need to do webinars, when they need to have video conferences. So activating those vacant and historic spaces, but as it relates to what the needs are and assets in your community. I think with the right policies and, of course, the right spaces, urban-oriented startups could even test their products and services in rural public spaces. So draw on the distinctive economic assets of innovation, use these strategies to create your one-of-a-kind identity. In addition, I think I'll actually go back a little bit. In addition, I think focusing your work to flip the traditional narrative of modern rural America. So, typically it's been argued that rural America, rural Indiana is homogenous, or there are backward places that people want to escape from, but really rural communities are home to deeply, deeply rooted social and emotional attachments, as well as really long overlooked signs of economic promise. Creative placemaking can help tell that narrative. In addition, I think we'll move into the topic of art integration, because it covers a lot, and I think is what it's most commonly thought of in terms of placemaking, but it's also very, very critical to economic development. So integrating art in your creative placemaking strategies could be things like, having local artists offer pop-up classes or workshops. You could have themed shows or exhibits around other community events. So whether you're having a river tour or bicycle or motorcycle rides, or any other existing events which may present a captive audience interested in purchasing art. So temporary pop-up exhibits as well. Maybe those would take place in a former jail or in an abandoned church. In addition, pairing this with the digital skills, look into what the capacity would be for having some type of artist residency program or even a guest house. So if there's funds and space available, of course, but the programming could consider, renovating a part of a vacant building to house maybe short-term artists, as well as guests, maybe through a site like Airbnb. The residency program could consider partnering with local colleges and universities. You could partner with K through 12 schools, and depending on funding and availability, those residencies could last anywhere from just a few days to several months. So essentially the artists would be provided a living space, they'd be provided a small stipend and a workspace, and in exchange, the artists would sell their pieces in the building. They could offer lectures or teach classes or program at other public events. They could visit the local schools and teach and visit art programs. And then for a finale, create a piece of public art in collaboration with community members. And then the last piece I'll mention, which is really common, are the mural program. So murals essentially help transform these underutilized spaces into public destinations. Focus is to increase traffic and provide a sense of place by reinforcing the character of the community. It's extremely common. And then the last category of placemaking is this tactical placemaking. So the examples I have here, it's a little hard to read the sign at the top, but this was an installation by an artist that put up 20 different street signs in different locations, and it's questions about your city. So some of the questions would be, would you recommend your city to others? Do you think it is a good place to make a living? Are there good options for housing? And the goal is to get people to start talking about their community and build some momentum on opportunities, but also to celebrate the great history that exists. Some other tactics for tactical placemaking are these kind of seasonal and one-off events. So, a one-time event can generate support or awareness for a project. So this could be a street closer, to block parties, to help, kicking off some type of campaign by showing the potential of a particular public space. And a really common tactical placemaking effort is the parklet. So taking, a parking space and providing outdoor seating or even dining options that are temporary. That it's not a permanent installation. These could additionally could be just open streets. So an initiative where parts of the streets are closed off in certain areas, but then they're turning them into temporary public spaces for walking or cycling or just hanging out. And then activating temporary spaces. So an example of this is I worked in a community in Arkansas. It was a very historic building that had been vacant for a long time. And as a part of the revitalization project, we held a community forum there, and folks were so interested. They'd come in and say, oh, I haven't been in here in 15, 20 years. I can't believe how beautiful it is. Thank you for opening it up. It's nice to remember what was here, and would love to have to showcase it to developers to have it redeveloped. It's just an opportunity to highlight those assets. And above all, I think out of everything, if I were to summarize, even though this isn't the last slide, these are the things that I would call the change framework. And the ones that I would emphasize the most would be at the bottom. Plan for the future of work. Whatever you do regarding placemaking, experiment with it. Make sure it's flexible. Observe the impact and then repeat it. Tweak it as needed and repeat it. And then at the end of the day, tell your story. There are a lot of communities that, are certainly strapped for cash, but there are a lot of ambassadors and partners that you can use to help with PR and help with social media. In addition, for example, partnering with your high school for marketing efforts to alumni, partnering with the school systems that can help you push out to celebrate the good things that are happening, and in using their marketing resources to help spread the word. And then it's fundamentally working with your business community to also help spread that out. You know, most medium to large size businesses have folks on staff that can help with that communication piece. So partner with your existing businesses. And the last couple slides, I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to highlight innovation and the intersection with placemaking. And so this goes along to what Roberto had talked about. So I'm gonna go pretty quickly through it. But in terms of innovation, I think it's critical to understand what critical growth areas are to address. Is it broadband? Is it that local businesses and talent can't grow or start a business? Is it the lack of talent? And, you know, what are your core strengths? And then marrying that with your placemaking efforts. So based on a survey, it's called the Rural Establishment Innovation Survey, it says that arts may be even more important to rural innovation than they are to urban innovation. So data suggests that there's a stronger connection between arts and innovation in rural areas, including that the share of firms that are highly innovative rises sharply alongside performing arts organizations in rural areas. So, meaning the probability that a rural business will be highly innovative increases from 17% to 44% as the number of performing arts organizations in a rural county increases from 0 to 1. So ultimately, you know, there's an association between arts innovation and economic dynamism in rural areas. I think you can conclude that arts are a direct force in rural innovation and not an indirect factor, and especially when it comes to attracting and retaining talent. The other thing I wanted to mention of how some other communities are intersecting innovation with placemaking. So talk about innovation hubs, which doesn't necessarily mean it's a brick and mortar hub, but it's actually a connection of resources, and intersecting that with education and training as it relates to entrepreneurship. In addition, these hubs are focused on the sectors that are most prominent in their communities, and then having wraparound services. And really wraparound services, I mean things like workforce development, entrepreneurship support, small business development, and then making sure that you are partnering with a college or university. And may I suggest Purdue? Other things on here that I think are important to highlight regarding innovation would be schools. And so, you know, focusing on the intersection of innovation and how to increase the capacity and educational attainment in schools. And some of that means teachers. How do you attract and retain teachers, and how does that intersect with your placemaking activities and programs? Are there incentive programs and teacher residency programs that might be related to, you know, revitalization of a vacant building in your artist and residency program? Opportunity zones. So I can't emphasize this enough. Same with what Roberto said. Leverage the opportunity and opportunity zones as it relates to placemaking. It is a great way to highlight your assets financially, and it's just a great way to compound the incentive package overall. And the last, really but not least, focus on the future of work. I think especially in a post-COVID area, and not that we know what that's going to look like, but I think, you know, based on the impacts that we have felt this spring and summer, broadband is critical infrastructure, and advocating for that at all levels of government is needed right now. In addition, advocating and investing in entrepreneurship and small business development is needed right now. And so making sure that you are intersecting that with your placemaking efforts is critically important. So I know I just talked a lot, but I think I'll end there and wait for questions.
Well, thank you, Courtney. And let's go to some questions if we can. Let's see here. See if there are any questions from the group. Does anyone have any questions for Courtney and Roberto? Remember, you can use the raised hand icon on your screen, or you can type your question directly into the question and answer box, and I will read it out, and Courtney or Roberto will answer it. Any questions? Okay, we have one from Brenda McAtee. Brenda, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question. Brenda, would you like to ask a question? You're on mute. Let's go to George Byers. George, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, my question is for Roberto, and that is, after looking at the slides he had on the digital divide, does he have any model cities that he recommends that we look at who have gotten it right and have found ways to ensure that the problem was addressed?
Thank you for the question. Well, it depends what aspect of the digital divide. If you're looking solely at infrastructure, there are a couple that come to mind. One of them is Ammon, Idaho, AMMON, has a very successful broadband infrastructure project going on. There's a Chattanooga, Tennessee, obviously, is another one. And then obviously, the first thing I would suggest is reach out to your incumbents, your current providers, and see what they need to ensure that you expand infrastructure. On the other fronts, on the broader digital inclusion, it varies. There's a lot of communities. Feel free to send me an email, and I would be more than happy to follow up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. Brenda McAtee. Okay, it looks like Brenda might be having some difficulty. Brenda, would you like to type your question in the question and answer box? Does anyone else have any questions for either Courtney or Roberto?
Yes, this is George Byers again from Elkhart, Indiana. More of a comment, a solution to some of the problems we have in providing internet to low-income families. The city of South Bend is currently using their school buses at hubs to go out into those neighborhoods that do not have internet access during school hours to ensure that they're able to do their schoolwork. I thought that was a very unique solution. I don't know if anyone else has tried anything like that, but that might also be something that can be expanded to provide those kinds of services to underserved populations.
George, this is Courtney. I echo that. So I do know that there are some communities, both rural and suburban, that are doing the same thing. But I think the other, slightly the other challenge in general with schools being able to do that is funding for transportation, which in some areas is a significant challenge, and even finding bus drivers, qualified bus drivers to do so. I think that's going to be a temporary fix, but I'm not sure. I haven't heard yet if they plan to do that long term to help.
Well, one of the things that we're kind of running into locally here in Elkhart, Indiana, you do have provider agreements with AT&T, Verizon, and all the others who are doing it for profit, and they are concerned about, how do they get paid in such an environment?
Yeah. Yeah.
We have a question here from Molly Trueblood, who says, I'm curious if the presenters could share strategies for overcoming the rural last mile broadband infrastructure problem. I'm assuming partnerships and advocacy, but I'm curious what other options might exist for communities.
That's a good question. I think Roberto had to drop off, if I'm not mistaken.
He did, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. Yes, advocacy, which I know is, people probably roll their eyes at it, but I think actually the timing for it is perfect now. I mean, communities have been talking about getting additional funding and deployment for broadband infrastructure for years, decades probably, but years. And it's fallen on deaf ears, I think at both the state and the federal levels. I think now people are starting to listen. So contact your representatives, work with Prosperity Indiana to keep that bug in their ear and make it loud. In addition, I'll say, I don't have a perfect response for you, but things that have worked well is when the business community has come together to put together a plan and say, here's why we need it. We want to grow our business here. If you don't, we're going to have to relocate, which means we're going to have to take, investment and people out of your community. And typically when either businesses from a local or regional perspective come together to do that, I've seen it be successful. I saw it work in Hot Springs, Arkansas, when they desperately needed broadband, and it was the business community that came together. They didn't have any elected officials, no policymakers on that council, on their broadband council. So if you can rally your business leaders to push, sometimes that works a lot better than having it be led from the top down.
Thank you, Courtney. And our last question is from Brenda McAtee. She says, how can I get more information on making a green room in the neighborhood?
I'm happy to follow up with you. So yeah, if your neighborhood is developing, I would talk to your builder and your developer, but there are developers looking into that and have asked for guidance from consultants about what to do. So they pivoted when folks wanted co-working spaces, right? So they included, or they pivoted when they wanted, when folks wanted workout rooms in their apartments, and they wanted retail on the bottom, and now they're looking to pivot again to have that option. Especially I think folks living in I think it might have, the conversations might be more related right now, for what I've seen, to very dense areas. You're in a small apartment, you're in a studio apartment. I don't want to be working all the time in my apartment. Can I at least have a room in, on the top floor to have this green room so I can spread out and I don't have to, bother my neighbors with talking. So happy to follow up with you, and I can put you in touch with some developers that are doing it in the Central Indiana region.
Great. On behalf of Prosperity Indiana, I want to thank each of you for participating in today's webinar, Creating Quality of Place and Marketing Rural Communities. Please look from me an email this afternoon inviting you to take a very brief survey. Your feedback is very important to us as we use this information to enhance the quality of our webinars and training. Also, please check out our website, prosperityindiana.org, to view upcoming events and training in September. Next Tuesday, September the 8th, we will host a webinar, an introduction to financing affordable housing projects, low-income housing tax credits. The webinar begins at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and registration is open on our website. Before we close, I'd like to thank again today's sponsor, Fifth Third Bank, for its generous support and helping us to host these informative webinars. I also wish to thank our presenters, Courtney Zogg and Roberto Gallardo, for their incredible insights. Again, we appreciate your participation, and this now concludes the webinar. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful week.